Jamie Varley was responsible for protecting children at his school. He adopted a baby boy named Preston Davey. 4 months later, Preston was dead with 40 injuries on his body. Varley knew exactly what to tell social workers. He knew how to hide his true intentions, and he filmed everything. Baby Preston Davey never stood a chance. The odds were against him from birth, born to a murderous mother who was serving a life sentence for the brutal killing of a pensioner. But what happened to Preston after his birth represents one of the most shocking failures of the British care system in recent history. He was adopted by Jamie Varley, a teacher who was the head of safeguarding at his school, and his partner, John McGowan-Fazakerley. Varley knew exactly what to say to social workers. He knew how to structure conversations to avoid raising any red flags. He was designing out from those conversations anything that would have caused concern about his suitability to adopt. Within 4 months of Preston moving into their home in Blackpool, he was dead. The case horrified investigators, devastated those who followed it, and generated headlines across the country. The question remains, how could a head of safeguarding, a man responsible for protecting children at his school, become one of Britain's worst child killers? Preston Davey was born 4 weeks premature on the 16th of June 2022 at Wythenshawe Hospital in Manchester. His mother, Sarah Davey, had been taken there from prison to give birth. She had been serving a life sentence for the murder of a pensioner named Lily in 1998. The killing was extraordinarily brutal. Sarah and an older girl befriended Lily at a shop, and she invited them back for a cup of tea. They gagged her so tightly that it knocked her teeth down her throat. She suffocated to death. Then they put her body in a dustbin and wheeled it through the town, eventually dumping it in the Rochdale Canal. Sarah Davey received a life sentence with a tariff of 8 years because of her age. She was released and then recalled to prison on multiple occasions. It was during one of her releases that she met Preston's father and became pregnant. Preston never had a chance from the moment he was born. His grandmother offered to care for him, but she was denied due to breast cancer. 5 days after his birth, an emergency care order was put in place by Oldham Council. Jamie Varley and John McGowan-Fazakerley appeared to be the perfect adoptive parents. They posted frequently on social media, showcasing their beautifully furnished home, their good jobs, and their little dog. Varley was a teacher, a head of year at a local school. His partner was a manager in finance. To all intents and purposes, they ticked every box. They were Instagram ready, but appearances can be deeply deceptive. Varley had one particular role that should have raised questions in hindsight. He was the head of safeguarding at his school. He would have known the procedures, the language, and the expectations of social workers. He would know the things to say and the things to do to impress them. He was able to structure conversations that would design out any red flags about his suitability to adopt. The system is encouraged to increase adoptions by LGBT couples, which is right, but it allowed a predator to exploit this. 1 in 5 adoptions in England and Wales is by an LGBT couple, 600 adoptions per year. But it was not Varley's sexuality that was the issue. It was his ability to manipulate the system. Before Preston was placed with Varley and McGowan, he was in foster care with Sandra and Paul Cooper. Sandra Cooper was an experienced foster parent. She and her husband had fostered over 20 children. This was going to be their last one. And she was very concerned about what she saw with Varley and McGowan. She raised a number of concerns during the adoption process, but her warnings were ignored. Sandra Cooper gave evidence at the trial. She told the court about her concerns. And then something happened that day for the trial to be stopped. The next day, when Sandra Cooper was expected to tell the court more about the red flags, she was no longer giving evidence. The defense accepted what she said. They were not going to challenge her evidence. But what that did was deny what she was going to say from coming into the public domain. The public never got to know what were her concerns about Varley and McGowan. A very experienced foster mother who had looked after over 20 children had raised alarm bells. But the system chose to ignore her instincts, and Preston was placed with the couple anyway. After Preston moved into Varley's home on the 1st of April of 2023, the abuse began almost immediately. The following month, just a month later, he was taken to hospital with breathing difficulties and bruises. The marks were so noticeable that police were informed and social services were called. No action taken. 4 weeks later, he was back in hospital, yet more markings on him. Varley said a toy must have fallen on his head. No action taken. A week later, another visit to hospital, this time with a fractured broken arm at the elbow. Varley claimed it was accidentally caused while placing the child in and out of the cot. 2 social workers were involved, Amy Shepherdson and Helen McGee. Amy Shepherdson messaged Varley to say, "Just to reassure you, They said they had absolutely no concerns. You absolutely did the right thing. Helen McGee visited the home the day after the broken arm incident. She wrote in her notes, "You were happy there with both your daddies, and this made me ponder a little as to whether there was a problem that I could not see. I decided there was not an issue. Within a few weeks, Preston was dead." The abuse suffered by Preston was not limited to physical violence. There was psychological torture, designed to cause maximum distress to a vulnerable toddler. Varley filmed his cruelty. In one video, he put Preston on a roundabout and spun it as fast as he could, while the child was clearly in distress. He set this sickening footage to Kylie Minogue's "Spinning Around." In another video, Varley played Moana in the background and deliberately kept Preston awake, shouting "boo" at him. The little boy understood this was not normal. Varley even pulled Preston's eyes open so he could see what his eyes were like. The videos were, in a sense, trophies, a record of the torment. Varley was a drama queen, constantly seeking attention. He had a desperate need to draw attention to himself, to be at the heart of everything that was happening. In court, when he was sentenced, he was retching, making a big scene. His partner was quiet, calm to a degree, but Varley was play acting. The prosecution believed that Varley had adopted Preston for the specific purpose of abusing him. On the 27th of July, 2023, Varley was at home, alone with Preston. His partner was at work. Varley had taken a year off school to look after the child. On his phone, police found pictures he had taken that day of Preston, gasping for air and clearly needing resuscitation. The prosecution believed this was just after Preston had been sexually abused yet again by Varley. More than 90 minutes passed before McGowan arrived home, and an ambulance was finally called. Preston was taken to Blackpool Victoria Hospital. Varley's excuse was that he was bathing Preston, and he must have slipped off the bathing chair in the bath and may have drowned. The doctor said there was no sign of water being an issue within the child's body. His clothes were dry. Just a few days later, the Home Office post-mortem examination ruled out drowning and found 40 external and internal injuries. The little boy had been subjected to a catalog of abuse that would cost him his life. He would have been in the most awful pain. He could not breathe, and he would have known he was in pain. At the trial, the full extent of the horror emerged. Varley sent his partner a text message saying, "Your son has got another stiffy." McGowan's semen was found on the cot. When he explained in court why it might be there, it was not plausible. The prosecution built a case of systematic abuse. Varley was found guilty of murder. The judge sentenced him to a whole life term. He will never be released. McGowan was convicted of allowing the death of a child, 2 counts of child cruelty, and 1 count of sexual assault of a child. He was sentenced to 25 years, but there were also questions about the cover-up. The defense accepted what Sandra Cooper said, preventing her full evidence from coming into the public domain. And there was a chilling pattern. Varley was the head of safeguarding at his school. He knew how to pull the wool over other people's eyes. He was very good at verbally staging what had actually gone on. The school has to think through its own failures. Nothing was picked up about Varley before he was given responsibility for children. Jamie Varley has received a whole life term. He will die in prison. But the prison service now faces a significant challenge. How will they manage someone like Varley? In prisons, there is a hierarchy. Pedophiles are seen as being at the very bottom of that hierarchy. There have been cases where prisoners serving whole life tariffs have murdered other prisoners convicted of harming children. It is the prison service's job to manage these people because the prison service has a duty of care. But how will they manage Jamie Varley? He is a man in his 30s who could live until his 70s or 80s. Where will he be placed? There is a target on his back. Other prisoners would see it as a badge of honor to harm him. The prison service will be incredibly anxious that he does not attempt to take his own life. There is no possibility of rehabilitation for someone like Varley. He has a borderline personality, an insecure sense of self, strange mood swings, fear of abandonment. But none of that excuses what he did. At the center of it all was little Preston Davey, a boy who should have been safe, a child who depended entirely on the adults around him for love, care, and protection. But instead, he was subjected to a catalog of abuse that cost him his life. When you look at the eyes of Preston Davey, you can see the little boy knew. You can tell the little boy knew that his life was ending. He would have been in the most awful pain. He could not breathe, and he would have known he was in pain. There are inquiries, of course. There always are. Baby P and Haringey, Maria Caldwell in the 1960s. There are always lessons that are learned, But somehow, the system continues to fail. There was a failure at every level. The school has to really work out its safeguarding checks. The hospital has to think through how they did not intervene when it was clear this child had unexplained injuries. The social workers have to think through their own failures. But none of that brings back Preston. The murder of a child is always difficult to comprehend. But some cases are so shocking, so disturbing that they leave an entire nation asking how such cruelty could have gone unnoticed.